The next step in the process with the plugs is to actually check the gap. As any spark plug has between the tip, there's a gap in there that should be set. I asked in the forums what the gap should be, and somebody replied, "Don't worry about it, they just come pre-gapped." That's crazy. You need to check that they haven't been bumped in manufacturing or something. They probably are pre-gapped properly, but you need to check. So I've looked at the Aston Martin workshop manual, and it actually says the gap should be 1.2 to 1.3 millimeters. 1.2 millimeters converts to about 48 thousandths. So I have a standard spark plug gapping tool, but my choices are 44 and 54. Neither one of those fits between 1.2 and 1.3 millimeters, so I'm not going to use that. So I got out my handy dandy feeler gauges, and I'm combining a 16, an 8, and a 25. Together that makes 49 thousandths. And I'm pinching it together with one hand to make them tight together. And I'm delicately fitting it in there, and I have a nice snug fit at 49 thousandths, which is right between 1.2 and 1.3. So yes, this factory plug is gapped right, and I'm going to work my way through all the plugs just to confirm that they're all snug on 49 thousandths, and I want to make sure they're right before I put them in. Just a little bit, these are the official Aston Martin supplied plugs. I did check all 12 of my plugs. They were all properly gapped. They really need to be 1.2 to 1.3 millimeters, which is about 48,000 to 52,000. Mine basically were about 49 or 50,000 each, which is right in the middle, which is great. This plug is an NGK PTR 6E dash, looks like a 13, and then it has XR1EBA on it. So I don't know if we can buy these. Probably we can from an aftermarket source, since it's just an NGK plug. But it did come in a nice fancy Aston Martin box, but I could probably do without the box if it saved me 10 bucks a plug. The only other tip before I reinstall these, I'm going to make sure when I reinstall them I'm going to torque them to 16 to 20 Newton meters, and that's 12 to 15 foot-pounds for you Yankees, which I'm one of. So I'm going to basically put them back in. And I am going to put just a tiny dab of oil on the first thread, so that as I'm putting them back together, they're not going into the cylinder dry. So I'm not getting any oil down on the sparker. I'm just basically getting the first threads damp, so that just a little bit on there as it's going into the cylinder. So yep, gonna get them set up, and then use my torque wrench and pop them back into the cylinder heads. Alright, I want to show you how to reinstall the spark plugs. So I've already taken my plug, and I've got a plug socket, 6-inch extension, and I have two 3-inch extensions. I have just one installed right on here now, and I have my torque wrench. I happen to have a digital one, and it's set to 18 Newton meters. The range was 16 to 20 for tightening the plugs, so I've set it to the center of that. So installing your plugs is definitely one of these things where you do not want to try and use brute force. So my first tip is, I'm not gonna, inside the plug socket there's like there's a rubber gasket. I'm just barely putting my plug in, because when I bottom out and I finish tightening this thing up, I want my socket to come back out. I don't want it to disconnect from the extension. So anyways, I've just basically buried the socket till all the threads are hidden, the face of the nut's hidden. Second thing is, you don't want to bang the tip as you put it into this deep bore.
So I'm just gently settling it down there, and I'm certainly not using any air tools. And in my other tip segment, I showed you put a drop of oil maybe on top on the first couple of threads, and I'm using my hands to run it down the whole way. The head is aluminum, the plug is steel. If you cross thread this thing, you're going to wreck the head and be looking at literally tens of thousands of dollars of repairs. So if it doesn't go by hand, take it back out, figure out why it's not going by hand, and try again. Throw the plug away, buy another plug, wait a week, whatever. Don't wreck your head. Alright, so I'm bottomed out by hand, putting on my torque wrench. And checking my settings, still says 18, and that's it. Taking off the wrench, and then with a little luck, the socket comes out and leaves the plug inside. Now I'm going to show you one other one to give you a tip for how you work with the ones that are way under the back by the underneath the cowl. I'm going to start with a single 3-inch extension attached. I'm going to feed it down, and here I couldn't get a 6-inch on. So anyways, I'm feeding it part way down, holding it with my fingertip, adding the second extension. Now I'm going down, putting it on the top of the plug, which I already had in there, adding my wrench to it. And torqued. Taking the wrench off. And pulling it back up, taking off the first 3-inch extension, and now pulling out the socket. So hopefully that tip saves you a little misery, but you do need 2 3-inch extensions to make that work. Alright, hope that helps.